Sarah and Jake had heard the stories about Crescent Valley, how it was once a thriving town until the mysterious fog rolled in one night and wiped it off the map. People said the fog wasn't just thick and blinding, it was alive, swirling with a sinister energy that made the very ground tremble beneath your feet. Locals claimed that anyone who ventured into the fog never came back, and the few who did were never quite the same. They said the fog carried whispers, strange voices that would lure you in until you were lost forever. But Sarah and Jake weren't believers in ghost stories. They saw the whole thing as an exciting opportunity to explore an abandoned town. Armed with flashlights and cameras, they set out in the early evening, eager to find what was left of Crescent Valley. The moment they crossed into the valley, the air felt different. It was thick with an oppressive silence that made their skin crawl. There were no birds, no rustling of leaves, no sounds of life, just the feeling of something waiting. "Sarah, did you hear that?" Sarah asked, halting in her tracks. She spun around, looking over her shoulder, but the woods behind them were empty. "Jake." "What? It's just the wind. Let's keep going." But Sarah couldn't shake the unease gnawing at her. The fog hadn't even started yet, but something felt wrong. As they walked deeper into the valley, a dense mist began to roll in from the far side of the town. It started as a thin layer, but it grew thicker with every step they took, until the ground beneath their feet was barely visible. "Sarah, I think we should turn back," Sarah said, her voice shaking now. The fog was swirling around them and she could barely see Jake beside her. "Jake, we're fine. Just a little fog, Sarah. It's not going to hurt us." But Sarah's unease deepened. She could feel it then, the whispers in the air, faint but unmistakable. It sounded like voices calling out from the fog. The air was colder now, almost freezing, and the deeper they went, the darker the fog became, as though it was swallowing the light of their flashlights. Suddenly they heard the sound of footsteps, slow, measured, like someone walking just ahead of them. "Sarah, Jake, did you hear that?" Sarah asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Jake, that's not us," Jake said, his voice tense. "Sarah, I don't know if we should be here. Let's go back. Something's wrong." But before they could turn around, the whispers grew louder. They sounded like distant, unintelligible voices at first, but now they were clear, and they were calling their names. Whispers, "Sarah, Jake, come closer." The voices were sweet at first, coaxing them forward, promising safety, but Sarah felt her heart pounding in her chest. She could feel her body grow heavy, as if the fog itself was weighing her down. Every step felt like it took more effort. "Jake, what's happening? I can't move." The fog closed in around them, and the whispers turned to laughter, low, mocking, and filled with malice. The ground beneath them shifted, the dirt feeling unstable, as if the valley itself were alive, shifting and moving. Suddenly the fog parted for a brief moment, and they saw something, shadows flickering just beyond their flashlights. They weren't people, not quite. Their forms were twisted, shapeless, and seemed to slither through the fog, their movements too fluid, too unnatural. Their eyes glowed faintly in the darkness, pale, ghostly eyes that gleamed with an intelligence that sent terror coursing through their veins. Sarah screamed, her voice cracking. They turned to flee, but the fog seemed to pull at them, dragging them deeper into its grip. The whispers grew louder, drowning out everything else. Sarah's heart raced as she ran blindly through the dense mist, her legs feeling like they were stuck in molasses. Jake was beside her, but she could barely see him now. Then the whispers stopped. The fog parted just for a moment, revealing a stone archway, an entrance to what looked like an old cemetery. But the graves were unlike any Sarah had seen before. The tombstones were twisted, their inscriptions scratched out, leaving behind only strange symbols and marks that seemed to move when she wasn't looking directly at them. Jake gasped, pulling her toward the archway. "We have to go through there." But as they moved forward, the fog began to close in again, and the ground beneath them began to sink. They stumbled, their feet slipping into what felt like a bottomless pit, and they fell, falling for what felt like hours. When they finally landed, they were somewhere dark, somewhere cold, somewhere they couldn't even begin to recognize. The fog had swallowed them completely. They heard the footsteps again, closer now. Then came the laughter, loud and inescapable. The figures in the mist surrounded them, closing in, and Sarah realized, with a bone-deep terror, that the whispers were coming from them, from the creatures that moved in the fog. They were trapped, no way out. Days later, the locals would tell of 2 bodies found at the edge of Crescent Valley. Sarah and Jake, their faces frozen in terror, their eyes wide and lifeless. The fog had rolled back that morning, leaving the town untouched, but those who dared venture too far in would whisper that the fog never truly left. It was waiting, always waiting for the next pair of fools to stumble into its grip. Have you ever found yourself hopelessly lost, confused, and feeling like you were being watched? Beware. There are terrifying and mysterious beings that few have ever seen and lived to talk about. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe and follow us for more. Join us on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube for more bone-chilling chronicles, if you dare.